Take me somewhere to warmer weather, to something better than here right now. 'Cause the days get longer, the nights grow colder, a lonely shoulder when you're not around.
This is Mulligans, where life gets messy, love gets complicated, and second chances just might save the day. Let's begin. Chapter 4. Chase stared into the fire, trying to locate the whitish-blue flames, the concentration of the most intense heat. The fire licked at the pile of logs dug into the beach, and Chase watched, mesmerized. What was it that fascinated men since the dawn of time with fire? It was hypnotic as it slowly destroyed what it was given and simultaneously gave the gift of heat and light. What was also hypnotic was the soliloquy spewing forth from the girl sitting on the log beside him. He could feel her gaze blasting him from the right. She was obviously not as enraptured by the fire. Maybe a soliloquy was the wrong word, Chase thought, because she most definitely wasn't just speaking to herself, although she might as well have been. He pondered that for a moment. If a monologue isn't heard or acknowledged by its intended audience, is it then in fact a soliloquy? He thought he could justify that rationale, but then again, he was occasionally grunting an acknowledgement that she was still speaking. So that would be acknowledging her, so maybe it was more like a really long monologue she was involved in. The truth was, he had no idea what she had been saying, and as he glanced over at Christy, he actually felt a twinge of compassion for the girl. It was obvious now that they had been set up, and she was giving it an A for effort. Christy was a pretty Asian girl and biochemistry major or something like that. Chase had only registered the first two pieces of information, so he could identify the girl he was supposed to spend the evening with as he and Tyler had driven to the beach. It wasn't like this was the first time that Tyler had set him up. It was a fairly regular occurrence, actually. He always enthusiastically thanked Tyler for his efforts, and then fell into a melancholy of anxiety for the rest of the evening. And so now here they all were, in another night of courteous discomfort, his own little personal hell. Chase sat staring into the fire, wishing to be absorbed by its heat and disappear from this situation. His date was overexerting herself in a vain attempt to gain his interest and make it a successful evening. Tyler and Bree were obviously on again as they cuddled on the opposite side of the fire. Chase watched the newly acquainted couple through the dancing orange flames and felt a twinge of jealousy. It wasn't directed at either one of them in particular, just a twisting in his gut, a tightening of the muscles there. It wasn't that he wanted Bree, or even the more likely possibility that he might actually want Tyler. Even if that were the case, he couldn't allow that thought to reside in his consciousness for too long. If it took root, he feared it would cause him even more restless confusion than he already suffered. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he realized he harbored some resentment toward Tyler. It just didn't seem fair. He was born into a practically perfect family, was handsome and charismatic, could obviously have his choice of careers and women, and was straight. How much easier could life get? It was a strange brew that stirred inside Chase as he watched his friend, and he suddenly realized through the murky jealousy and resentment that he didn't in fact want his best friend, as he'd feared. It was more than that. He wanted to be him. He wanted the power of having people fall in love with him. He wanted to come across as confident and cool. He wanted to feel comfortable in his own skin and not worry about what other people thought about him. He wanted to stop being the yes man always looking to Tyler for approval. He wanted to stop pretending to be something he wasn't. And he wanted to stop being set up on these stupid dates. And then, right when the fireworks started, he asked her to marry him, Christy exclaimed, beaming in the excitement of her own story. Chase turned to her to see if this was a pause in her monologue or the end of it. It appeared as if that was a signal, and so he felt compelled to offer an insightful response. Wow. I know, right? So romantic. Growing up is so weird. I'm going to 3 weddings this summer. Christy turned and said this loud enough for the whole group to hear, her eyes landing on Bree and Tyler suspiciously. Don't expect an invitation from me anytime soon. Chase looked up to see a handsome black guy had walked up to the fire, a case of beer under his arm. You need to find a girl willing to wake up to your ugly mug every morning first, Tyler joked as he stood to give the new guy a hug. Who needs one girl when I can have a whole cheerleading squad? The guy laughed as he sat down on the log beside Chase, opening the 12-pack and tossing one to Tyler and Bree. You almost done with that sports medicine degree? Ready to be my masseuse when I get drafted to the NFL? When you make the draft, give me a call, Tyler promised, laughing. Beer? The guy had turned to Chase, his hand extended with a bottle and his big brown eyes dancing like there was a joke forming in his head. Yeah, sure, Chase replied, taking notice of the muscles stretching against the cotton of the new guy's t-shirt. Jared, this is Chase. Chase, Jared, Christy offered, snuggling into Chase's shoulder as if it was actually necessary to get that close to make the introduction. Chase is a painter. No shit, I did that for a few summers with a cousin, Jared said, twisting the cap off his beer. Not houses, silly. Chase paints on canvas. He's an artist, Christy explained, taking obvious pride in her date's talents. It's totally different. Well, you get dirty doing one or the other. I just use a smaller brush, Chase offered. You're funny and cute, Christy said, leaning even further into Chase's shoulder if that were possible. If you ever need a model. Actually, I'm more of a landscape guy. Chase thought he saw Jared chuckle as he took a pull of his beer. The conversation with Christy thankfully subsided for a while, allowing Chase to go back to quietly observing without her interrupting it. A light breeze drifted off the lake and swirled through the flames, causing them to snap deliciously around the wood. Looking up the beach, he could see clusters of other people gathered around beach fires, huddled close, enjoying the warmth of the fire and each other. Chase felt a tap against his shoe and looked down to see a blue sneaker tap against his own white one. He glanced up to Jared, who stared straight into the fire as he spoke. You watch football? Yeah, sure, Chase lied. Did it count if Tyler was watching a game in their dorm room while he read a book? Jared looked over at him with a smile. Who's your team? Steelers? Chase answered, it sounding more like a question than a statement. Jared just nodded, the smile spreading further across his face. Oh yeah? Who's your favorite player? I don't know, man. Chase silently cursed himself for not paying attention during at least one game. Jared's knee brushed against his own, just for a second, and then rested there, a millimeter apart. The sensation sent an electric current through Chase, up from the base of his groin into his throat and back again. He could feel the energy shooting between them as the tiny hairs on their legs danced on each other, barely touching but sending that roller coaster up through his stomach each time they did. On Chase's right side, Christy still hung onto his shoulder, feeling for all the world like a dead weight, and one that he'd do anything to get out from under. On his left side, Jared continued to sit looking into the fire, drinking his beer and letting their legs accidentally touch for all too fleeting moments. Chase's left side was zinging with energy, and his right felt unnecessarily burdened. He almost laughed at the disparity within himself. Jared suddenly turned and chuckled. Too much beer, I gotta take a leak. Chase felt his left side get cold as Jared left, his eyes following him up into the tree line. Unfortunately, it was clear that Christy saw this as an opportunity to make a move again and began a mini interrogation. So, you and Tyler are going to be working at the golf course? Yep. Chase took a swig of his beer and stared across the flames at Tyler and Bree, who were fully engaged in an Olympic-level game of tonsil hockey. So, you're going to be here for the whole summer then? That's the plan. We should hang out, Christy suggested, anything but casually. Yeah, sure. Christy took notice of Chase eyeing Tyler and Bree across the fire and lowered her voice conspiratorially. They're ridiculously cute, right? Every summer, back together, just like clockwork. They're right on schedule, Chase offered. Maybe we could go out with Bree and Tyler sometime, like a... Will you excuse me for a second? Too much beer. Chase interrupted and stood without waiting for an answer. The last thing he wanted to hear coming out of her mouth was the word date. It just made it that much more complicated, with higher expectations and more deceit on his part. He'd gotten pretty good at using his dedication to scholarly pursuits as an excuse at the university, but that wasn't going to fly here. He needed time to think up a new, valid reason why a summer romance wasn't on his schedule. Chase's eyes adjusted to the darkness away from the fire as he made his way up the beach to the tree line where he'd seen Jared enter the forest. He wasn't even really sure what he was doing. He just sensed he needed to follow his intuition on this one. Or maybe more accurately, it was an instance of thinking with his little head instead of his big one. At least, when he was letting his pelvis lead the way, it prevented him from considering consequences, repercussions, and reality, which all seemed to hit him over the head simultaneously as he entered the woods. What the hell was he thinking? That he was going to march up here and confront Jared and say, what exactly? That he thought possibly there was some chemistry down at the fire when their legs accidentally brushed against each other? This was a bad idea. Bad idea. Bad idea. He was about to turn around and walk right out of the woods when he saw Jared casually leaning against a tree, twirling a couple rocks in his hand and watching him. Hey. Jared exhaled coolly without moving, his eyes still locked on Chase. Hey, I just came to, Chase stammered, not having the faintest idea how to finish that sentence. That's cool. Go ahead, Jared said, still twirling the rocks between his fingers. Take a leak. That's right, that's all I came up here to do, Chase thought as he turned and unzipped. But his mind was racing, both the big one and the little one, and the last thing he thought he had motor control over was aiming down right now. Actually, I don't really have to. Chase zipped back up and turned back slowly, trying to laugh it off. Me neither. Jared dropped the rocks and walked toward Chase. Chase turned and started to head out of the woods, but he felt a hand on his shoulder. Going so soon? Chase felt a strong arm circle round his waist and skillfully turn him back around. They stood like that for what seemed like an eternity, waists pressed together, faces inches apart, sharing the air between them. His breath came in rapid, shallow bites. He could smell Jared's cologne mixed faintly with the clean smell of his detergent. The current of energy ran on an accelerating loop up from his groin to the top of his head and back again, over and over, faster and faster, as Jared pressed harder against him. Jared, what are you doing? Come on, let's have a little fun. What do you mean? Chase managed between his shallow breaths. You know what I mean, Jared replied, his chocolate eyes imploring him. I can't, Chase said, not entirely sure why his mouth was contradicting every other part of his body. Yes, you can, Jared insisted, leaning in to kiss Chase, his hands pulling Chase even further into himself. And for all the world, Chase's body yelled back, yes. He had never felt so completely free, so completely right about something he had long ago decided was completely wrong. His skin was literally tingling all over as his tongue pressed against Jared's in a ferocious duel of exploration. He felt the cool night air rush into his nostrils, and he tasted the cedar trees, the faint campfire, and the damp moss clinging to the trees and rocks around them. In a single isolated moment, he heard the waves lazily lapping up against the beach, their friends laughing around the campfire, and the hum of the nocturnal insects. He thrilled at the feeling of the lips brushing against his own, and the contented growl that rumbled through Jared's chest and reverberated in his own. He suddenly realized this was being alive, this knowing, this awareness. Snap. Chase instinctively pulled away and spun around, looking for the source of the sound. Did you hear that? It's nothing. Come on, Jared encouraged, grabbing Chase by the belt buckle and pulling him back into another kiss. I can't. I'm not, Chase began. Gay? No, I am. It's just... Chase didn't finish the sentence. He realized he'd come out for the first time, and it had just happened. No big, premeditated delivery, just simple and true. Not out? Me either. It's okay, Jared confessed. The boys just looked at each other, the realization of what had just happened dawning on them. We should get back. Hold on. What are you doing tomorrow night? Trying to not have a date with Christy? Chase laughed. I don't know. I'll probably be with Tyler. Don't tell him, okay? If he knew about me, he'd freak out, Jared cautioned, reaching out and giving Chase's hand a squeeze. Let's go. Chase considered Jared's words as they headed back across the beach to the campfire. Would Tyler really freak out if he knew about Jared? If that was true, what would he do if he found out about him? He decided maybe it was best if his newfound honesty with himself stayed hidden a little while longer, at least until he had time to reflect on it. As they reached the campfire, Tyler was covering it with buckets of sand, and Christy and Bree were folding up the blankets and putting empty beer bottles into cases. "Hey, guys, we're packing it in," Tyler said, pouring another bucket of sand over the ashes. "Chase, can you drive? We got to take Bree home, and I'm a little buzzed." "He's a lot buzzed," Bree corrected. "So, that's a night, huh?" Jared asked casually, picking up a few empty bottles. "When did we get so old?" "Christy, I can give you a ride home if you want." "Thanks, Jared." Christy turned to Chase and slipped a paper in his pocket, planting a quick kiss on his cheek. "Give me a call sometime." "Hey, where's my kiss?" Jared walked up to Christy, arms wide to receive a hug. "You're laying all your love on the new guy? How about some sugar for us old friends?" After watching Christy fulfill Jared's request, Chase walked over and extended his hand to shake. Come on in for the real thing." Jared pulled him into a hug and whispered in his ear, "Not a word, got it?" "Yeah." Chase swallowed, already feeling mixed up about their experience in the woods. Jared pulled away and punched Chase in the arm. "Steelers, ha! Your team is going down, buddy." He draped an arm around Christy and they headed for his truck. Chase swallowed hard as he watched them go. He and Jared were already obviously different guys fighting the same battle. Chase quickly made his way through the Beamer's gears into Fifth and sped down the twisty lake road. He knew he was basically headed the right way from Tyler's vague direction, so he wasn't worried. It was a lake after all, and Bree's family's summer house was somewhere on the water. Head in either direction on the lake road, and he'd eventually find it. His mind, which had been so wonderfully clear and free in those fleeting moments with Jared in the woods, was now back to its incessant rambling. He'd felt so courageous when it was just the two of them there, like whatever anyone else thought didn't matter and couldn't touch him. "You were hiding in the woods under the veil of darkness," he wryly reminded himself. "That's not all that courageous." But even still, he'd taken a first step. He'd followed his instincts, and they were correct. He'd sensed that Jared was interested in doing more than just talk football with him, and he'd been right. What would happen if he followed his instincts even more closely? Could he access that feeling again of being completely free of his own mind and the constant chatter and restrictions it placed upon him? He felt himself getting excited again as he imagined Jared's mouth on his own, as he felt the ghostly pressure of the other boy's muscled body against him. One thing was certain: the summer was suddenly looking a lot more exciting. He glanced in the rearview mirror and was surprised to find himself smiling as he watched Tyler and Bree making out like cats in heat. He suddenly understood they were just following their instincts and were lost in the special world of each other. And every time Tyler had tried to set up Chase on a date, it was because he cared. He wanted Chase to feel what he had felt tonight. He realized that he cared for Tyler even more now, that he understood the motivation behind all those setups that he'd just found annoying in the past. Tyler was doing it because he cared about Chase. He was just unfortunately misinformed, and to no fault of his own. His mind flickered back to what Jared had said about Tyler freaking out if he knew. Would he really? Had something happened in the past between those two that had given Jared that insight, or was he just projecting his own fear about the situation? Chase wondered. In his opinion, Tyler had always been nice to everyone, the type of guy who easily blended with all the different cliques at college. But then, they'd never really hung out with anyone who was gay before. He couldn't even recall a time when the subject of gay had come up in a conversation between them. Maybe Jared was right. Maybe Tyler would freak out. "This is it. Turn right into that next driveway." Tyler emerged from the back, wrapping an arm around each front seat to give directions. Chase pulled into the long tree-lined driveway and up to a beautiful A-frame log cabin. He watched in the mirror as the lovers shared another long kiss goodnight. "It's nice to be back. Together, I mean," Bree said as she opened her door. "Yeah." "You'll call me tomorrow, right?" Bree made him promise. "Yes, I'll call you tomorrow," Tyler said as he climbed out of the back seat after her and gave her one last kiss before jumping in the passenger seat. "Fun night, huh?" Chase put the car in reverse and backed up to the lake road. "Yeah, fun night. So, you and Bree are back together, huh? Just like that." "Just like that." "Is it serious this time?" "Nah, I mean, yeah. Serious for a summer fling. I don't know." Tyler laughed, pulling the passenger seat mirror down to check his mug. "Man, my lips are raw. She was eating me alive." "So you're not in love with her?" Chase asked, throwing the stick shift into first gear as he pulled onto the lake road. She smells better than you, if that's what you're asking. What is this, like 20 questions? Tyler joked, flipping the mirror back up. Just wondering. I think Christy's into you. Tyler offered the obvious. Yeah, she told me. So, what are you going to do about it? Tyler asked, excited that his matchmaking might have actually found a match. I think Jared's into Christy too. I'd move fast if I were you. Chase considered letting his friend know that he had more than a sneaking suspicion that Jared was in fact interested in someone else. He wanted to tell him so badly, wanted to share the amazing experience he had in the woods, to tell Tyler that he finally understood what it was like to be excited about someone. That's what best friends do, isn't it? Share everything, no secrets, no shame. He thought of Jared and realized he also had a new friend that he owed something to. He owed it to Jared to keep his mouth shut. At least for now. I move at my own pace. Yeah, first gear, Tyler joked. Chase rolled his eyes and shared the laugh as he accelerated and shifted the car up through the gears. Maybe it was time he accelerated his love life too. Nathan tried desperately to focus on the board game as Birdie drew another question card from the deck. They were playing boys against the girls with him, Tyler, and Chase forming a team against Stacy and Birdie. The game was called Identity Crisis, and the correlation between it and his current frame of mind wasn't lost on him. He'd never considered a midlife crisis as a real threat. After all, he'd been greeted by crisis before, and he always made quick, rational decisions and moved forward. He wasn't one to dwell on the potential paradoxes of a problem. So what the hell was the matter with him lately? He couldn't seem to get off the constant hamster wheel of self-doubt and second-guessing that had besieged him. And maybe that was the problem. There was no apparent solution. Each question only led to more questions. He was creating a labyrinth in his mind of what-if scenarios, an elaborate choose-your-own-adventure novel of paths not taken. That was part of what was currently missing in his life, any sense of adventure. His existence had become rote, mechanical, and the most abhorrent objective he could imagine, predictable. It wasn't that he had a feeling of not having accomplished anything. He was quite proud in a quiet way of his family, his success at the architecture firm, and to afford a lifestyle that he considered very comfortable. But what now? He had worked so diligently on the challenge of pushing the boulder up the hill for the past 20 years. The challenge felt over now. Was the only excitement left to push the boulder down the other side and follow it, turning over and over, day after day in the same monotonous fashion, until one day it just stopped? He shuddered at the thought. Something was missing, something intangible yet essential to his happiness. Daddy? Daddy, it's your turn. Birdie caught his attention, waving her hand in front of his face, each finger capped with a game piece like thimbles. Time's up, Miss Muffet. Stacy saved him by beginning to pack up the game. I said we could play until 8 o'clock, and it's 8:15. Time for you to have your bath. But, Mom, Birdie complained. No buts, just your butt in the tub, Nathan said with a wink. Good night, boys, Stacy said as she took the game in one hand and Birdie's in the other and headed for the bathroom. Tyler looked up at Chase from another text message on his phone, a distraction that had kept him half attentive all evening. I'm gonna take the girls to a movie. You want to come? Nah, I'm good here, man, thanks. I'm pretty swacked. I think I'll call it an early night, Chase declined. All right, suit yourself. Playing hard to get, are we? Tyler asked, already on his way out. Chase just shrugged. Christy will be disappointed, Nathan guessed. Already have a girlfriend? No, but I already know I'm not into it, so why pretend and then let her down? Quite the Casanova, are you? Nathan laughed. I didn't mean it like that. Our interests are just a little too similar, Chase explained, focusing his attention out the window. You want another beer? Nathan asked, already out of his seat and headed to the kitchen. Come on, let me show you the best place in the house. Before turning into the kitchen, Nathan saw Chase raise his eyebrows curiously and get up to follow. And Nathan realized for the first time all evening his mind was suddenly, thankfully, quiet and clear. The best place in the house was in fact not in the house at all. It was on top of the house. Nathan noticed Chase's eyebrows arch even higher as he leaned a ladder against the house and climbed up, his beer bottle stuffed in the back pocket of his jeans so he could have a two-handed grip. Nathan turned and held the ladder in place when he reached the top and waved down to Chase. "Come on up." Nathan smiled as he watched Chase mimic his action of placing his beer in the back pocket of his jeans and make his way up the ladder. Nathan reached out and gave Chase a hand when he reached the top rung, and for a second almost pulled his hand away. There was a warmth there he hadn't expected. This was in fact Nathan's favorite place in the house, one that he'd only shared with Tyler previously. The roof had a very gentle slope, and Nathan crossed it to where 2 lawn chairs lay covered with fallen pine needles and leaves. He shook them off and unfolded the chairs to face the lake far below. Chase settled into the seat beside him and pulled the cap off his beer. The summer sun was just beginning to set, and the sky was like a brilliant tie-dye of orange, red, and mauve. "Makes you feel kind of small, doesn't it?" Nathan finally asked, interrupting the quiet between them. "Yeah. I guess if we only get to live once, you want to make sure you're doing the things you want. It goes by so fast." Nathan couldn't help but laugh. "You have no idea." Chase just continued, obviously lost in his own thoughts. "I guess I just want to leave my mark somehow, make a difference." "Like with your painting?" "Maybe. I don't know." "Well, what would you want to change?" Nathan asked. "I don't know, just stuff," Chase answered, his eyes locked on the lake. "Sounds like some heavy stuff," Nathan guessed, and then allowed another silence to pass between them. "I guess I've just been thinking about, well, what are you supposed to do if you like someone and there's a possibility it could upset someone else?" "Why would it upset the other person?" Nathan asked. "Well, maybe the other person always imagined you with someone else, and so they'd be disappointed. But maybe it's not worth risking their disappointment because what if the person you like isn't even who you're supposed to be with in the end?" Chase asked, only occasionally looking at Nathan out of the corner of his eye. "Is this about Christy?" "No!" "Oh, that would make it so much easier." Chase shook his head, an ironic grin shaping his mouth. They fell into a silence again. Nathan wasn't sure which questions to ask, and for that matter wasn't quite clear about what the problem might be. The sky had given up its bright orange hues and was dressed in the light purples of twilight when Chase finally spoke again. "Was it weird getting married right out of high school?" Nathan was taken aback by the new focus of the conversation on him. "I don't know about weird, it's just what happened." "So, you never dated anyone else then?" Nathan just shook his head. "We were planning on going to different colleges, but then, I guess when we got pregnant, well, we knew we loved each other, and so the decision was kind of made for us." "Do you ever wonder if you picked the right person? I mean, how do you know?" Chase asked, looking over at Nathan. If it weren't for the earnest expression in the young man's eyes, Nathan might have been tempted to tell him to mind his own business, but the sincerity there convinced him otherwise. "No, I mean, yes, sometimes. Choices have to be made at the time, and you make them, and then your life becomes your life. One day I wake up and I have a wife, a job, a house, and a couple kids, and it's like, when did that happen?" Chase held his stare and just nodded, seeming to fully comprehend the immensity of all this. But how could he? He was a college kid. "I sometimes wonder if I was a teenager now instead of back then, if I would have made different choices," Nathan confessed. "Like what?" "Just different. People are a lot more open-minded now." Nathan took in the absurdity of the situation he was in. He was a man in his 40s sharing the very problems that had been weighing so heavily on his mind with his son's best friend, a kid practically half his age. Why was it so easy to talk to Chase? He felt an inexplicable bond and a simultaneously unsettling sense that he was talking to himself. "I've never really talked about that with anyone before." "Your secrets are safe with me if mine are safe with you," Chase promised, then looked down, smiling. "What?" Nathan asked. "Nothing," Chase lied. "You just look like Tyler when you're deep in thought like that." "You mean, he looks like me," Nathan corrected. "I'm the original." The men laughed and watched as the first stars began to appear in the night sky. Nathan enjoyed the easy nature of their time together. It was as simple to carry on a conversation with Chase as it was to sit in silence and just be. It looked like he and Tyler shared a taste in the company they liked to keep. "I'm gonna call it a night. I want to get down that ladder while I can still see it," Chase laughed as he stood and made his way over to the edge of the roof. "Thanks for the beer and the chat." "No problem. It was nice. I'm glad you ended up staying in tonight," Nathan said, following Chase to the ladder. Chase looked up at Nathan as he began his descent. "Me too. Good night, Mr. Davidson." Nathan climbed down and pulled the ladder from the house. He watched as Chase crossed the yard and entered the guest cottage, flicking on its lights. "Mr. Davidson, what are you thinking, old man?" Nathan entered the house and was surprised at how foreign it suddenly all seemed. All the collected knickknacks from over the years seemed to stare at him like alien things. Stuff, stuff, everywhere just stuff, and this was his life. A life that had been fastidiously designed, and as he looked around he realized how little it all meant to him. He was becoming detached. He loved his family very much, but suddenly the idea of pulling around the weight of all these years of memories and mementos seemed a burden. Nathan grabbed a golf magazine off the coffee table in the living room and lay down on the couch. He flipped mindlessly through the magazine, his eyes barely registering the lush green courses and players profiled inside. He was barely halfway through when he tossed the magazine on the floor and shut his eyes. He rested his hands on his chest and tried to regain the peaceful quiet his mind had captured on the roof. He lay there, resembling a corpse except for the deliberate, slow rise and fall of his chest as he tried to encourage a meditative state. After a few minutes, he was successful, to a degree. The chatter had stopped at least. What was left was a slow parade of images, some captured from memory and some imagined. Nathan's eyes almost opened as he felt an unexpected sensation. He felt his body. Suddenly, he was really feeling it. He was aware of himself all the way down to his toes. He wiggled his toes and felt the socks around them. He felt the denim hugging around his thighs and the cotton collar of his polo shirt gently pressing against the back of his neck. It was so simple and yet sensational. Nathan realized that he'd been living in his head and had been denying the existence of his body, and he'd been doing it for so long he couldn't even quite recall when it had started. Warmth gathered in his chest and spread slowly through his body. He could almost detect the tiny hairs on his arms and legs responding as the energy passed through him. The warmth collected in his stomach and moved down into his pelvis. Nathan felt the denim getting very tight there, and he realized he was very, very horny. As the parade of images continued to scroll through his mind, he slid one hand down his body and stroked the front of his jeans, further exciting himself. He slid the other hand up and under his shirt, dragging it over his chest, imagining the whole time that the hands belonged to someone else. He couldn't even remember the last time he had pleasured himself, and the thrill of doing it in the open of his house added to the rousing danger of it. Being a family man was a lot different from being a bachelor, he thought. You couldn't just pull it out whenever you got the urge. Of course, that was the curious part. He rarely even felt the urge, as if he had neatly folded up his sex drive and packed it in a box. It just seemed easier that way. He didn't have to face it or deconstruct the sexual images in his head. He was free to focus on every other aspect of his life without distraction. And it had become easier over time. As a young man in his teens and 20s, all he could seem to think about was sex. As the years went on, it became easier and easier to just ignore. He unbuttoned the top of his jeans and stuffed his hand in, grabbing himself firmly. This was not so easy to ignore, and the urgent excitement he was feeling in his gut made him clench his jaw and squeeze his eyes shut. He wanted the intangibles in his mind desperately, and he also desperately wanted them to leave him alone. Nathan exhaled a long, frustrated breath and opened his eyes, letting them adjust to the reality of the room. The wooden beams on the ceiling, the rich Merlot window dressings, and the faint smell of the leather couch beneath him. He pulled his shirt down and removed his hands from his pants, but it did little to relieve the hard-on straining distinctly against them. He'd go to bed, he decided, and swung his legs down off the couch. Nathan entered the bedroom and noticed Stacy was already sleeping, a book fallen against her chest and her reading lamp still on. He crossed to the closet and undressed, throwing his shirt and jeans over a chair. He was already beginning to feel more himself as he slipped into the washroom and dressed his toothbrush with paste. Temptation got the best of him, and he soon had one hand in his boxer shorts as the other one brushed. He closed his eyes again, imagining another's firm grip. His breathing became rapid and shallow as he brushed harder and stroked faster. "Nathan?" He heard Stacy call in a half-asleep voice from the next room. He pulled the hand out of his shorts and rested it on the sink, panting. He bent over and spit into the sink and rinsed his mouth. He looked in the mirror and smiled sardonically at himself. "Yes?" he answered as he flicked off the washroom light and crossed to the bed. "Are you coming to bed?" Stacy asked, closing her book and setting it on the nightstand. Nathan answered by climbing in and turning out the lamp on his nightstand. Stacy turned and did the same. Nathan rolled over and curled into Stacy, rubbing his fingers along her arm. He pressed against her and Stacy turned with surprise. "Nathan? You want to mess around?" he asked, already letting his hands begin to rove over his wife. "Now? Or we don't have to," Nathan answered, his hands stopping in place. "No, I'd like to, but are you sure?" Stacy asked, turning to Nathan. "Look, do you want to or not, Stacy?" "You're not all that attractive when you're grumpy," Stacy accused, crossing her arms and leaning back against the headboard. "Forget it." Nathan turned onto his side away from Stacy and stared at the wall. "Come on, you just surprised me, that's all." "I said forget it. I'm not in the mood anymore. I'm going to sleep."
And that's a wrap on this chapter of Mulligans. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and that it got you thinking about the complex relationships we all navigate, the ones that challenge us, change us, and ultimately shape who we become. If this chapter spoke to you, or if you're reflecting on the big questions of love, family, or second chances, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below or hit me up on social. Whether you're pondering Tyler's journey, Chase's emerging sexuality, Nathan's dilemma, or Stacy's challenges, or just want to share your own thoughts, I'm here for it all. Don't forget, if you're craving more, you can grab your very own copy of Mulligans. The paperback, ebook, and audiobook are available with links in the show notes. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the next chapter. Trust me, things are about to get even more interesting, and I can't wait to share it with you. Until next time, remember, second chances are just around the corner, and love can always find a way, no matter how messy it gets. Keep dreaming big and loving boldly. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next chapter of Mulligans.
Take me somewhere to warmer weather, to something better than here right now. 'Cause the days get longer, the nights grow colder, and lonely shoulder when you're not around. Tell me, do you want me right now? I don't wanna wait to find out. I need you to love me lights out tonight. Will you love me till the sun goes down? Will you love me till the stars burn out? And tell me, do you see a future filled with me? 'Cause I do. I see you, I see you, you, you. 14 hours and 14 days.